my wife was sleeping with my business partner 3 days before we were supposed to sign the papers that would have made him a co-owner of the company I built from nothing. And the only reason I didn't confront her that night was because I already had a plan. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized city in Ohio, the kind of place where the steel mills shut down before you were born, but everyone still talks about it like a fresh wound. My dad worked 2 jobs most of my childhood. My mom kept the books for a local HVAC contractor and taught me, without ever sitting me down to say it explicitly, that if you wanted something in this life, you had to build it yourself because nobody was coming to hand it to you. I started Arcline Creative when I was 26. It was a brand strategy and design consultancy. Nothing glamorous to most people, but to me it was everything. It started in my apartment with a second-hand monitor and a client I found on a freelance forum who paid me $800 to redesign their landscaping company's logo. $800 felt like $8,000 at the time. I worked nights, weekends, skipped vacations, declined social invitations, ate sandwiches over my keyboard. By the time I was 30, Arcline had 12 full-time employees, a real office with actual furniture, and a client list that included 4 mid-sized regional brands and 1 Fortune 500 account that I'd landed by cold emailing the CMO 47 times over the span of 6 months. I met Cassandra at a networking event when I was 28. She was working in marketing at a pharmaceutical company. Sharp, funny, beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself immediately but settled into you slowly. Like a song that sounds ordinary the first time but won't leave your head. We dated for a year and a half. I proposed on a Tuesday night in our kitchen. Pasta on the stove, no grand gesture, no crowd. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. We got married on a warm September afternoon with 80 people at a vineyard outside the city. It was the best day of my life. I believed that completely. I met Marcus Webb 2 years into running Arcline. He was a freelance strategist I'd hired for a pitch, and his work was excellent. The kind of thinker who could walk into a room full of executives and make them feel like they'd been waiting their whole careers for what he was about to say. We clicked professionally first, then personally. He became a regular contractor, then a close collaborator, then something close to a best friend. He'd been to our house for dinners. He'd spent holidays with us. Cassandra and Marcus had always gotten along well. I thought that was a good thing. I used to think about how fortunate I was. A thriving business, a strong marriage, a partner I could trust completely. And then the architecture of that life began, slowly and almost imperceptibly, to come apart. The first thing I noticed wasn't anything dramatic. It was small. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, maybe 9 months before everything detonated. I came home from a client dinner earlier than expected and Cassandra was on her phone in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her back to the door. She startled when I walked in. Genuinely startled, the kind of full body flinch that isn't performance. She laughed it off, said she'd been texting her sister. I didn't think much of it at the time. People get startled, it happens. But something small and quiet moved in my chest. I ignored it. I'm good at ignoring things that are inconvenient. Most men who build things from nothing are. The second thing I noticed was that Marcus had started calling Cassandra by a nickname. He'd always called her Cass. Now it was Cass and raw, drawn out, almost musical. The way you say someone's name when you enjoy saying it. I caught it once at a dinner with a few mutual friends and filed it away without examining it. Probably nothing. Probably just easy familiarity between two people who'd known each other for years. The third thing was that Cassandra started going to the gym more. Which, I want to be careful here, because that's not suspicious on its own. People start going to the gym, but the timing was odd. She'd always gone in the mornings before work. Now she was going in the evenings. Sometimes not getting home until after 9. And when she got home she was energized in a way that didn't read like post-workout fatigue. She was bright, elevated, somewhere else in her mind even when she was sitting across from me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had a lot going on at work. The acquisition talks with Marcus. Formalized now, moving toward a real partnership structure where he'd buy a significant equity stake. Were consuming most of my mental bandwidth. I told myself the distance I was feeling was mutual stress. That we were both distracted. That it would pass. It didn't pass. By January, the feeling had grown from a small quiet movement in my chest to something that sat in my stomach. Like a stone, I started noticing micro moments of disconnection in our marriage that I'd been editing out of my memory for months. The way she'd stopped reaching for my hand in public. The way our conversations had shifted from real exchanges to logistical updates. Who was handling the grocery order? What time was dinner? Had I seen the electric bill? The way she laughed more freely at her phone than she ever did at anything I said. I want to be clear about something. I didn't want to believe what I was slowly starting to believe. I loved Cassandra, not in a passive, habitual way. I loved her actively. I thought about her during the day. I still got a small, involuntary lift in my chest when she walked into a room. The idea that she might be doing something that would destroy us was something I kept setting down. Walking away from, refusing to pick up. But your gut doesn't forget things the way your conscious mind does. Your gut keeps accounts. The investigation, I hate that word, but I don't know what else to call it, started almost by accident. In early February, I was working late and I needed to use Cassandra's laptop because mine had died mid-document. She was in the shower. I opened it to pull up a client file I'd sent to her email months ago to print. Her email was open. I wasn't looking for anything. I want to say that plainly, because it matters to me that it's true. The email at the top of her inbox was from a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The preview showed 3 words before the screen timed out. 3 words that rewired everything in my brain in the span of a single second. I closed the laptop, sat down at the kitchen table, heard the shower running, sat with those 3 words doing what they were doing to the inside of my chest for about 4 minutes. Then I got up, went to my home office, closed the door, and made a decision that would define the next several months of my life. I wasn't going to react. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Over the next 6 weeks, I built a picture. I want to be careful about how I describe what I did, because I'm not proud of all of it, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Karen, in her 50s, who had done this work for 20 years and had the manner of someone who has heard every version of every story and stopped being surprised by any of it. I paid her out of a personal account Cassandra didn't know about, one I'd kept from before we were married for the specific and ironic purpose of eventually using it as a down payment on a vacation home. Karen confirmed what I'd been failing to disbelieve for the better part of a year. Cassandra and Marcus had been meeting at a hotel in the downtown district on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. That was the gym. That was the elevated energy when she came home. That was the phone she turned face down whenever I walked into the room. Karen gave me photographs, timestamps, documentation. She also gave me a look when she handed over the file. Not pitying, not soft, just steady. The way someone looks at you when they know you need to feel the floor under your feet before you start moving forward. The part that broke something in me that I don't think ever fully healed was this. Marcus was at my house for dinner 3 nights after Karen gave me the file. He sat at my table. He ate my food. He laughed at something I said and reached over and clapped me on the shoulder and said, genuinely or seemingly genuinely, that he was glad we were doing this. The partnership, that this was going to be something great. Cassandra poured him more wine. Their eyes didn't meet across the table. They were too careful for that, but I watched them carefully for 6 hours that night, and I saw, in the small spaces between normal things, the entire architecture of the lie they built inside my life. I excused myself after dinner and stood in the upstairs hallway for a few minutes with my back against the wall. I could hear them laughing downstairs. His voice and her voice and the sound of glasses being set down, and I stood there and I felt something I can only describe as the opposite of rage. A cold, structural clarity, like a room with all the furniture removed and the walls laid bare. I saw exactly what I had. I saw exactly what I needed to do with it. The month that followed the confirmation was the strangest period of my life. I functioned. I went to work. I spoke to clients. I had the preliminary partnership conversation with Marcus where we started narrowing the terms of his equity stake. I came home. I sat across from Cassandra at dinner. I said normal things. I asked about her day. I did not grip the edge of the table. I did not look for evidence in her face that she knew that I knew. I went through the motions of my own life like an actor who had memorized the lines so completely that the performance required no conscious thought. And I planned. The lowest point, if I'm being honest, wasn't the night Karen gave me the file. It was a Saturday morning about 3 weeks later when Cassandra was making pancakes and the kitchen smelled the way it had always smelled on Saturday mornings. Coffee and butter and something warm. And she handed me a plate and smiled and said she'd been thinking about maybe taking a trip up to Lake Erie in the spring. Just the 2 of us. Like we used to before things got so busy. I said that sounded nice. And I stood there with my plate of pancakes in a kitchen that still smelled like the life I thought I had, and I understood, really understood, in my body, not just my mind, that the person I was looking at had been lying to me for at least a year. That the person offering me a weekend at Lake Erie was the same person who had been meeting someone else at a hotel on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. That she was either too comfortable in her deception to notice any change in me, or she simply didn't look for it because she'd already quietly decided I wasn't someone she needed to worry about. That last possibility sat in me for a long time. But here's the thing about rock bottom. When you truly hit it, when there is no further down to go, you either stay there or you get very quiet and very focused. I got quiet. I got very, very focused. I called my attorney, a man named Phil, who I'd used for Arcline's business matters for 4 years. I told him I needed a divorce attorney who was aggressive, discreet, and available to start immediately. He referred me to a woman named Elaine, who came with a reputation in the local legal community that I can only describe as formidable. I met with her once, laid out the documentation Karen had compiled, and watched her read through it without changing her expression. When she set it down, she said, "This is good. This is very good." We talked for 2 hours. We built a strategy. The partnership deal with Marcus was supposed to close in 30 days. I let it proceed. I let all the paperwork be drafted. I let Marcus spend his own money on a business attorney to review the terms. I let Cassandra keep planning a Lake Erie trip that was never going to happen. I went to work every day and did my job and managed my team and made decisions, and the entire time I was carrying this other thing. This quiet, burning architecture of consequence. And I said nothing. The morning of the partnership signing, I arrived at the office 40 minutes early. My office manager, Rachel, who had been with me since the 2nd year of Arcline, was already there. Rachel is one of those people who notices everything and says nothing until the right moment. And the right moment had come about 2 weeks earlier when I'd quietly told her what was happening. Not to unburden myself. I needed her to know because what was about to unfold would affect the office. She had looked at me for a long moment and then said, "What do you need me to do?" That was it. No drama, no display, just, "What do you need?" I told her what I needed. Marcus arrived at 9:15, confident and easy, dropping his coat over a chair and asking if there was coffee. He looked the way he always looked. Polished, certain of himself, the kind of man who moves through rooms as though he already knows how things are going to go. I shook his hand, offered him a seat at the conference table, said we needed to go over a couple of final details before the notary arrived. He sat down, I sat across from him, and I began. I told him I'd done a thorough review of the partnership terms and found something I needed to raise before we signed anything. I slid a folder across the table. He reached for it, opened it, I watched his face. It was the documentation Karen had compiled. Photographs, dates, the hotel name, timestamps, everything neat, everything organized, in the same methodical way I approach everything. He didn't say anything for a very long time. The room was completely quiet. I had expected to feel something in this moment. Rage, or satisfaction, or grief, but I felt almost nothing. I felt like I was watching a controlled demolition from a safe distance. I was curious more than anything. Curious how he was going to try to navigate this. He started to say my name. I told him to stop. I told him the notary was not coming. I told him the partnership was not proceeding. I told him that his access to the building and all Arcline systems had already been revoked as of 8 this morning. Rachel had handled that quietly the day before. I told him that I'd already spoken to our 2 largest clients and introduced them to the account manager who would be handling the transition, framing it as a strategic restructuring, which was technically true. I told him my attorney would be in touch regarding the terms under which he would return the signed non-disclosure and non-compete agreements he'd executed when he first joined as a contractor, which remained fully enforceable. And then I told him that Cassandra had been served with divorce papers at 8:45 this morning. While he was driving to this meeting, he looked up from the folder. For the first time since he'd sat down, he looked directly at me, and I saw something in his face that I can only describe as the moment a person realizes there is nothing left to say, no version of events he could offer, no angle he could work, the entire structure of what he thought he was doing, coming here today to become a partner in a business he'd helped himself to the inner life of while deceiving the person who built it, had already been taken down, quietly and completely, before he walked through the door. I thought I would feel something like satisfaction in that moment. I didn't. I felt very still. I told him he could take his coat on the way out. He stood up. He stood there for a moment holding the folder like he didn't know what to do with it. He set it back on the table. He said my name once more, quietly, in a way that might have been the beginning of an apology. I didn't respond. I looked at the wall behind him until he left. The door to the conference room closed. I sat in the silence for a while. Rachel knocked once and opened the door and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. She said the Harmon account had called about a campaign review and did I want her to schedule it for Thursday. I said yes. Thursday works. She nodded and closed the door. I sat there in the quiet of the conference room I'd negotiated the lease for. At the table I picked out of a showroom on a Saturday afternoon with Cassandra. In the building where I'd spent more of my conscious hours than anywhere else in my adult life. And I waited for some feeling to arrive. Something like victory. Something like relief. Something like the sense that a chapter had ended and something new was beginning. What I felt was the particular silence that exists after a very loud thing has happened. Not peace. Not emptiness exactly. Just the specific quality of quiet that comes when something that had been making a great deal of noise for a long time has finally stopped. The divorce took 8 months. Cassandra contested several things. Her attorney tried to make an argument about the value of her contribution to Arcline's growth. She'd done some early marketing consulting in the first year, work I'd compensated her fairly for at the time. Elaine dismantled that argument with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has done this many times and is not impressed by the attempt. Because we had no children, and because I had documentation of the infidelity, and because I had been meticulous about protecting the business assets from the moment I knew what was happening, the final settlement was not what Cassandra had been hoping for. Marcus, I was told secondhand, left the city sometime in the spring. I didn't ask by whom. His name came up once, at a mutual friend's birthday gathering 8 months after the conference room. And the person who mentioned it trailed off when they realized what they'd done and changed the subject. I didn't fill the silence. I moved on. Arcline is doing well. We brought on a senior strategist in the summer. Someone I'd worked with years ago who has none of Marcus's liabilities and all of his talent. The Fortune 500 account renewed. We're pitching for a second one in the spring. I moved to an apartment on the east side of the city. Smaller than the house. Quieter. With a window that faces a park. I go for runs in the morning now. I didn't used to do that. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about either of them. That might sound like a performance of indifference. Something a person says to seem further along in their healing than they actually are. But I mean it sincerely. There was a period, roughly from March to June of the year after everything happened, where they occupied a lot of space in my mind, where I would lie awake and replay specific moments. The dinner where Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. The Saturday morning with the pancakes. The particular way Cassandra had said yes to a marriage proposal before I'd finished asking. And feel that cold structural clarity curdle into something older and rawer. But that period passed. Things pass if you let them. What I carry is different now. It's not anger. It's not grief. Exactly. It's more like a permanent recalibration. A shift in the instruments I use to read people and situations. I trust differently now. Not less, necessarily, but differently. I notice things I used to edit out. I take more time before extending the kind of deep access to my life that I once offered too easily. Too quickly, because I was raised to believe that generosity and trust were the same virtue. They are not. I know that now. Something else I carry. The memory of sitting in that conference room after Marcus left. waiting for a feeling that didn't come. I've thought about that moment many times since. What it means that I sat there in the ruins of what I'd built that morning. Deliberately, precisely, without a trace of the heat I'd been carrying for months. And felt nothing, not triumph, not even the quiet satisfaction of a debt paid, just that particular silence. I think for a long time I assumed the absence of feeling meant I'd done something wrong. That maybe I'd been cold when I should have been human. That I'd optimized for precision when I should have allowed myself to fall apart. Just once, in front of one of the people who had earned it. But I don't think that anymore. I think what I felt in that room was the truest feeling available to me. The feeling of someone who has set down a very heavy thing they were never supposed to be carrying. And is now simply standing in the place where they set it down. Deciding which direction to walk. I walked forward. That's it. That's the whole story. I've been asked, since, whether I regret how I handled it. Whether there was something cleaner or more human I could have done. Whether the months of silence and planning cost me something. Some piece of myself that might have survived if I'd simply come home that February night and asked Cassandra what was happening. Faced it together or faced it messily. Let the grief be immediate instead of archived and organized and deployed at a moment of maximum strategic impact. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I am someone who builds things. And when things break I tend to clear the site before I rebuild. That's not heroism. It's not even admirable, necessarily. It's just how I'm made. What I know is this. I didn't break. I didn't beg. I didn't make any decision out of panic or rage that I later had to undo. The company I built is still mine. Still standing. Still growing. The life I have now is quieter and smaller in some ways than the one I had. But it is entirely my own. Every corner of it. Every inch. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, I sit at the window in my apartment that faces the park. Early in the morning before the runs. And I think about the person I was before any of this happened. The person who thought he had it all figured out. Who trusted the two people closest to him with complete and unguarded certainty and never once considered that they might not deserve it. I don't miss being that person, but I think about him. I think he was trying his best with what he knew. And I think what I know now, what all of this cost me to learn, is that surviving the thing that was supposed to break you is not the same as winning. It's just surviving, and surviving is enough. It has to be enough. It's enough.